You can absolutely conquer whatever it is you choose to confront. In this show, we talk PTG, we listen and believe, we support and empower.
Hey, that's what I always dreamed of, but I was nervous sometimes.
Yeah.
Each time I moved a little closer and a little closer
Yeah.
and a little closer,
Yeah.
and some told me, just take a leap of faith.
There you
Go
go.
ahead, let's jump.
Ready? Let's go. Leap of faith. There you go. Whoa.
Whether you have experienced domestic violence personally or not, someone you know has. Your circle of family, friends, acquaintances, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience domestic violence at some point in their life. Physical abuse is only one of the many forms of domestic violence. Survivors also report experience of verbal, emotional, spiritual, sexual, financial, electronic, and so much more. Domestic violence does not discriminate. It can leave you traumatized and devastated, mentally, emotionally, financially. You can find yourself homeless, jobless, helpless. The list can go on. There's blankets of insecurities, triggers, doubts, and other residual effects that become hurdles that impact our life as we do our best to move on. Many people associate butterflies with a sense of freedom. We've been taught along the way to focus on the transformation that takes place inside of the cocoon. I invite you to take a moment to conceptualize all the odds the caterpillar was up against and needed to defeat in order to get to a safe place, to build its cocoon and actually experience the transformation. My name is A. Garcia. I am a mother and survivor of a double attempted homicide. Now, I'm dedicating my life to take yours to the next level by experiencing post-traumatic growth to begin a new chapter in your life. Let's get started on this journey together. Garcia here. Thank you for tuning in to Confronting Domestic Violence, for you cannot conquer what you choose not to confront. Today, I have a special guest, Stephanie O'Neill Snow, and she is a survivor leader for Sanctuary, and she is also a survivor of domestic violence. Today, she is here to share her story, to provide tools and tips, techniques to overcome, supersede, move forward, and get your mental house in order. Remember, one person's story and or journey can help save anybody's life. So thank you for tuning in. And Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
It is an honor and pleasure to have you here. We spoke a couple weeks back. You shared some very heavy things that you've made it through, and you are definitely on a journey of post-traumatic growth, which is something I love talking about all the time. And for listeners that haven't heard of post-traumatic growth, that is when we endure so much trauma, and the way we overcome it is by turning that trauma into triumph, becoming stronger and smarter from our experiences, and how we share that intellect, and how we help empower others. Nobody should suffer alone, and post-traumatic growth is something that we all obtain within naturally. It's just breaking through those barriers to get to that space of resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And Stephanie, by all means, please start wherever you would like.
I am a survivor of domestic violence going back to my childhood. My father used to abuse my mother. And he used to emotionally and mentally abuse us. Once he left our house, I could still remember everything that happened. But when he became sick, when I was about 30 years old, my aunts and uncles all said, you have the choice of going to see him in the hospital. He's been severely hurt. I took my power even though my mother said not to go, with my aunt, and I went to see him. And thankfully I did. I made peace with him because I knew he was abusive. I knew he had alcoholism from being in Vietnam. And he passed away a few weeks later. And I would have felt severely guilty for not going to see him when he died. And I am glad that I made that peace with him. Because when he was on his deathbed, I was the only one he was reacting to. Even when he passed away in his heart stopped.
Did you say reacting to you?
Yeah, I was the only one he was reacting to. I walked in and I said, Daddy, I'm here. The nurse goes, who are you? I said, I'm his daughter. But even the next day when his heart stopped and I was holding his hands and I started crying, his heart started again.
Wow.
When I stopped crying, he finally passed over. But in that moment of transition for him, I was having all of these dreams, the nightmares, the memories, the good ones, the bad ones. But to me, that was a sign he was okay and he was saying, I'm sorry. Because he physically couldn't see it the 2 times I saw him in the hospital. So I am at peace for knowing that he was an alcoholic and that's what caused him to be so violent. And it wasn't our fault. And he became an alcoholic from being in Vietnam. And that's how he transitioned all his trauma from remembering what he saw. And I had to make that peace with him. Because even to this day, I'm like, he never got to see his grandson. I told my nephew, he had a problem. That caused him to be the way he was. But it also made me and your mother and your grandmother stronger for surviving it. Your grandmother did what she had to do to keep us safe. Because my father wanted to kill us. He wanted to kill all 3 of us.
So this is like a generational trauma.
Yeah, and we continue to tell him that. When we still, he's 23 now, we don't tell him everything at one time. We start telling him until he was a teenager. But we had to explain to him how he was. And even like my sister's blocked out a lot of things. But I've told her, I said, you know what, he didn't mean to do it. I said it was part of his disease. Alcoholism is a disease, and that's what could cause the domestic violence. Your trauma from being in the military, their PTSD, can cause the violence. You don't know what makes them go crazy. It makes them so abusive. When my parents finally got divorced, I was like 20 years old. He hung over my mother's head, I'll give you all your child support if I can see the girls. Now, I was over 18, so I had my own choice. My sister was under 18, so my mother had to ask her. If she said yes or no, my mother had to go back to the court and say, this is what my daughter said, and the other one is of age. And we both said no. Why would, at that time, he tried to stalk me at work? Yeah, because my aunt had to decide and tell him where I worked. So I didn't want that because we were still scared of him back then. Because we didn't know what he would do. He died living in a welfare room and in the VA hospital. because he had nothing left from drinking. And I said to my sister, I said, we can't be like that. And I tell my nephew all the time, you can't be like he was. I said, your grandmother is your example. And I told my mother and I are now building our relationship. And I said, you know what? I'm sorry for blaming you when I was a kid. I said, I didn't understand. Now that I understand, I'm sorry. Because even now you're so powerful from even going through court and being in an abusive relationship as an adult. When I went into this relationship with this guy, I knew him as a teenager. And I only knew he was a baseball player for the neighborhood and this tough guy, because he would protect all the girls and he would walk all the girls home. I didn't know how mean he was. And it's every time he would come into the store my mother worked in at night to pick up his girlfriend, I was always there. My mother would laugh.
How old were you?
I was 15 because I used to see him on the bus on the bus going to high school, because his high school was near my high school.
So this was before your father got sick and was in the hospital. This was, okay, your mom had already separated from him and you guys were doing your own thing. Okay.
And as an adult, I ran into this guy again. So we started dating because I used to have this big crush on him as a teenager. And he goes, I'm single, and we started dating. But you know how narcissists don't show everything right away? And he was also a drunk. He slowly started showing his colors. Because I would come home, my sister gave me money for the storage, my mother's furniture from storage, and I had it in my dresser drawer, and it was gone when she came with the furniture. And she called me from downstairs. She goes, so where's the money that you put in the drawer? I said, I have no idea. It was there this morning. He took it and used it. My pit bulls were petrified of him. He even would take them for a walk, and he would lose them in the park when I lived in the city. And he called me, he goes, I lost her. I'm like, what did you do? And he goes, I was holding her and then she just got loose. I'm like, that's because you don't let her walk next to you. You let her walk in front of you. You don't have the control over her.
Why do you think the dogs were afraid of him?
He used to put them in the crate and leave them in the crate all the time. And then when I was in home, or even when I was home, he used to bang on the crate.
Was there abusive tendencies that he had towards you?
Yes. He used to, he lived off me financially. He used to beat me. He used to smother me. When I would come home from work at night, he'd be sitting on the couch. He'd already started drinking. And God forbid you walk past the television with sports on, you'd get the remote control thrown at you.
Were the
Get
dogs
out
trying?
the way.
Did the dogs try to come to your defense? Were the dogs abused during the same
Dogs
time?
wouldn't come to my fence. They would stay in the kitchen shaking. Because from the times he would leave them in the crate and he would bang on the crate, it scared them. And who knows what he did to them when I wasn't home, besides losing her, walking her out. But he did that. My nephew could have walked her at 10 years old with no problem.
Okay.
Except if you saw a squirrel, you had to pay attention to her, and she'd take you up down the street. But
Right.
when he would beat me, they'd be petrified and stay away. The one night I was sleeping, when I started to get seizures, I had a seizure. He was in the spare room and I was in my room. My female started pacing to try and tell him that he didn't pay any mind to it. And when I came out of the seizure, she was pacing to tell you I was having a seizure. I even had seizures flat out in front of him, but he was so drunk he didn't even pay attention to it. And I even called EMS on my seizures because I had a blank stare seizure in the kitchen because he was blasting the television with the music. And that can cause seizures, which he gave me from banging my head and smothering me and sitting on me. And yeah, 200 pounds, I'm 110 pounds. At one point, when he would cook, he had one of those original air fryers. Can't remember the name of it. Oh, the New Wave oven. Mother bought it for me. I started to get really sick. And we couldn't figure out why I got really sick. But when he would cook, he wouldn't clean properly. Then when he got the New Wave oven, he would cook. And he would leave the grease in there until it got a certain amount. And then he would throw it out. I'm like, that's not how you cook. That's one of the reasons why I'm sick. I said, stop cooking for me. I went to the gastro doctor. I wound up, because of him, I have IBS and I have celiac disease. Because I went to 150 pounds. And the doctor's like, you have something seriously wrong with you. And I even brought him with me for the doctor to explain to him. He went straight over his head. Even when I had ovarian cancer and I went to the hospital for surgery to have my ovary removed. Well, when it first started, my cyst started first bleeding. He didn't think, oh, you're lying. I said, so why am I gushing blood? I said, yeah, give me a break. I said, when I went back to the doctor, they found the cyst in the tumor. They're like, nope, come now. The day I had surgery, I kid you not, he was drunk. Because when the doctor went to go talk to him, he was incoherent. And she came into me while I was still in the operating room waiting to go to recovery. He is incoherent and I can't deal with him. And this is what happened to you. And my sister came to pick us up. And I'm like, just send him home. I will be with you for one night. And then I'm going back home because we were afraid of the dog sitting on me. And we both looked at each other. We were like, okay, fine. At least he's gone, because he was a jerk trying to get him in the car too. Because he didn't like my sister. My sister didn't like him. Because my sister saw straight through him. And when I came home after surgery, my house looked like time bomb went off. Dogs were so happy to see me. I said to my sister, I said, we should have just taken the dogs with us. Because yeah, I think so. Because he didn't pay attention to them either. The water bowl was empty. I don't even think he fed them. Because he was supposed to get fed twice a day. He didn't even feed them. When I had called the cops the first time, they didn't pay attention to me. They came, they questioned me, they questioned him, and they didn't pay attention to it. And they left. Second time it happened, this is after I'd slept in the office 3 times. And my one boss even took, I would go sleep in my office at night because it would get so bad. I'd leave the house, go sleep in my office at night. My one boss saw me, and he goes, what are you doing here? I said, I can't stay in my house anymore. I said, I'm just going to come here and sleep for a few hours. He goes, are you sure? I said, yeah. And he was busy, so he didn't put the 2 and 2 together. And when I would go to work with the bruises or the black eyes, they didn't put 2 and 2 together. And when I would have blank stare seizures at work, they didn't put 2 and 2 together. And when I would have them, my boss was talking to me and I wouldn't respond. When I would come out of it, I said to him, I just had a seizure. That's why I didn't respond to you. And he goes, you're joking. I'm like, no. I said, I had seizures because of him. Because he would call my office. I can't tell you, some days my phone will ring off the hook. And I'm like, I look at the girl next to me, I'm like, just don't answer it. I said, I'm too busy to deal with you. And she goes, oh, you mean it's like my ex? I'm like, yeah. I said, but he's more violent than your ex. And she would see all my bruises. And then she's, oh, but you're a hypochondriac. I'm like, I'm not a hypochondriac. It's Tommy is hurting me. And she goes, you're kidding. I'm like, no, I'm not. I said, I don't come into the office and tell you what goes on in my house at night. I said, but you can see it. I said, and you wonder why I have epilepsy. You wonder why I have problems. It's the second time, the last time before I threw him out. I worked late, I came home. Almost the middle of December, the beginning of December in 2015, laying on the couch, sleeping. He threw the cat in my face, sat on me, and smothered.
When you say smothering, is he almost like taking your breath out?
And it wasn't even the first time. And that's how I got the epilepsy. I got up when he got off of me, went inside, got my bag, walked out the door. And he called me. He kept calling me. I'm on the phone with my sister. She goes, move from the bus stop and go to the main entrance of the bus stop a few blocks away. She goes, because if he comes looking for you. That's what I did. I went into the office, I slept. They had a partners meeting early that morning. So I made sure I was out of the one partner's office off her couch super early. And I'm sitting at my desk. They're like, why are you here? And I said to them, look, he broke my nose when he was smothering me. Do you see my circles under my eyes? I said, and I bet you there'll be bruises on my arms later, if there aren't already. When they were like, okay, did you call? I said, yeah, I already called Safe Horizons and I'm going to the police station tonight. I said, they called and got sanctuary for me. And we filed, after I went to the police station and they looked at me, they were like, what the heck? I had bruises on my arms, my eyes were black and blue. And you could see that my nose was broken. My nose is still broken. Because I won't go and get the surgery. I'm like, you know what, I'll just leave it. Because that's not even the first time he broke my nose. He broke it when he shoved me into a closet in the beginning. After he got me thrown out of my apartment.
You threw him out of your apartment?
I threw him out of my apartment in 2015, but the first time he walked out of my apartment, he threw me in the closet in my apartment. I was living in one apartment. He got into a fight with one of the tenants, got us into a lawsuit. I wound up having to pay my part because we only went to court once. Oh, we don't have to go to court. Excuse me. So what do I do?
So I'm sorry, I want to ask a few questions. So were you married to him?
No, we were together for 5 years.
Okay, 5 years. So from 20, okay, for 5 years. And what did the police say when you went down there? Did they give you a restraining order? Did they help you with a shelter? What?
They had my locks changed. They filed a report against him on assault and something else. He wouldn't answer to the cops. Even when I got the restraining order from family court, they wouldn't answer the door immediately. I had to call one of our mutual friends that's no longer a friend of mine to get him to answer the door because she made him turn himself into the cops because he wasn't answering the phone. I gave him every phone number I had with anybody that had to do with him, and he wasn't answering the phone. And she's, you know what? We told you, don't touch her. And she's been to the cops already. This is serious. If she's gotten charges and a restraining order, you need to go and turn yourself in. So he did. He finally went to turning himself in, and it took 13 months in criminal court, and he pled to a lesser charge. And we spent 26 months in family court. We walked away without mistrial without prejudice.
How is it family court if it's domestic violence and you guys are not married and have no children?
Because we were intimate together and we lived together. So it could go to family in New York State. As long as you're in a relationship, it goes to family court and it goes to criminal court. Because you get two separate restraining orders.
If I may ask, so during court and the restraining order is still in effect, was he still trying to control and be abusive during that time?
He spent time next door with my neighbor, even though he wasn't supposed to. He had a full stay away order. The neighbor kept asking me, his friend that doesn't live next door anymore, goes, because she got smart. After I finished court, she threw him out. And he kept asking me, you could give me his clothes and I'll give them to him. And I'm like, no. I already told you, full stay away order means nowhere on the block, not happening. He's not allowed next door. I said, even if it was 500 feet, he still couldn't go next door. We're less than 500 feet from each other.
And you're still dealing with all of your medical issues during this time, right?
I was dealing with my medical issues. We were going to court once a month. And then he goes to me one day when he goes, and I already told him, I said, either you can be my neighbor, because the courthouse and the cops said, either he can be your neighbor, or he has to be Tommy's friend. And he has to pay attention to the order of protection from family court that says full stay away. It's even the criminal said full stay away, but the family court one goes even more into like no social media, no phone contact, no nothing. Even third party, no nothing. The neighbor kept asking me stuff. I'm like, what do you not get? Full stay away order. Don't ask me anything. Don't tell me nothing. We're not allowed to talk back and forth. He goes to me, like right after it happened, he goes to change locks. So of course it did. And he goes, next thing I know, I hear something land on my porch. That's how close he is. And it was the old key. So I'm like, either he has it or what's his face is next door. So I'm like, oh, perfect. Come to find out, after she threw him out next door, he had been in that house while I was in court, breaking the law. And I thought he was, because when I would come home at night, there would be empty cigarette boxes in my front yard. And I'm like, and it would be too far in the front yard than if somebody would have thrown it from the curb. So I called the lawyer one day. She goes, that's a popular brand. I said, yeah, but somebody couldn't have thrown it from the curb. They had to have thrown it from his driveway. So yeah, he not only threw my old key on the porch, he threw cigarette boxes in my front yard. He posted stuff about me because he didn't like what I was saying when I was testifying. One day when I was testifying, he posted pictures of me on Facebook. made me look like a skeleton and like really super thin and in a bikini top and put my picture on. How he figured out how to do that, I have no idea, because every time I owned his phone. So every time he would play with his phone or forget his passwords, I'm the one that was fixing it. So when he left, the cops were like, since you gave him the phone, you can't necessarily turn off his phone. I said, if I'm paying for it, he's no longer in my life, I can turn it off.
That's right.
I'm not paying for his phone anymore. I said, and I can't speak to him. So they were like, oh, you're right. Because I showed the cops the restraining order at the desk. Because never mind, after he got arrested and he finally went to the police station, I'm checking his phone log. Because even the day I told him to leave, my girlfriend called him, told him to leave. He used my house phone, he used his cell phone, calling next door, calling his cousins, and the whole spiel. So I'm like, okay, got it. So when I came home a different way, because I didn't know if he'd be next door, I checked the whole house, checked where all his clothes were, because he kept clothes in the attic too. His clothes in the attic were gone. And I'm like, okay, no problem, whatever. So my girlfriend goes, you need to go check your jewelry. Because the guy I bought my house with gave me a lot of jewelry. I go upstairs and it was gone. I'm like, okay, not gonna raise my head and hit the roof because I'll probably get a nail in my head. But whatever. I said, I'm alive. I said, the jewelry is a material possession, not worth it, like getting stressed out over. I said, I paid enough for this dude to live off me and to cause me all this trauma and to cause me all these medical issues. I have to focus on myself and I have to stay grounded.
So when he was sentenced, and you said it was 13 months and then he bargained down, well,
Yeah.
did he go to jail, or was he just put on like probation?
Probation.
Hmm.
He was released right away from his arraignment on ROR, and once he pled down, he got probation because he finally gave.
So did it ever stop? Does he still try to stalk or reach out, or?
He posted about me on social media a few months ago, and he did it like a year and a half ago. But we don't know, a year and a half ago, we don't know if it was about me, his ex-wife, or a girl that got him twisted in a bar. But we have so many mutual friends, he forgets that I find out. And we
Right.
both asked for the mistrial because his first attorney became a judge. And then he got a new attorney and he had asked for mistrial. And I said, the judge asks me, do you want to do mistrial? Mistrial without prejudice or mistrial with prejudice? And I said, because it's all up to me because I was the one that filed the complaint. And he was starting to testify. I said to the judge, I said, you know what? For my sanity and my safety, mistrial without prejudice. Because he knew I knew what I was talking about on the legal secretary. Because when I filed the first complaint with the family court, it goes, how do you know how to do it? You're really good. Because I'm a legal secretary. When we did the extended complaint with all the charges, I helped my attorneys draft it. Like I drafted everything. I wrote down every timeline frame, and then we drafted in what we needed to together. And the judge goes, oh my God. because they even pulled his record. Because when I was testifying, under the table was a box with just his name on it. So when we left, I told my attorneys, I said, the box with his records was from the table. They're like, you're joking. I'm like, no, I'm not joking. I saw it out of the corner of my eye. But anytime I was testifying, he was trying to intimidate me that the court officers had to go sit there. But even if we were in the waiting room, they could have put me in the waiting room and put him in the waiting room. They put me in the hallway. They put him in the waiting room. So they could watch me. The court officer could watch me because they didn't trust him. Because when we would walk from family court to ferry, he used to follow us. Because even when we went into the one building one day, the bigger building, when we were upstairs, they started to come down the stairs. They looked at me like they were pointing to the clerk's office. And I said, okay. So then they came up and got me when it was safe. But then they made me wait downstairs until they couldn't see him anymore. And then they made me wait a few minutes more, so he was further away from me. But the one day we caught him in violation, we filed paperwork. I had mentioned it to one of my friends, because even the posting the pictures on social media while we were in court was a violation. And I told it to my former friend, and his mother shows up in court to bail him out. I'm not joking. When we were walking out, he was coming out of the main building. My attorneys go, who's that? I said, that's his mother. We were almost 50 years old. And his mother came to bail him out.
Does she condone that type of behavior?
You wouldn't. Her husband is a drunk and used to beat her. And she puts up with the both of them. Because right before I threw him out that Thanksgiving, he went out all night drinking, came home in the early morning. He was barely asleep long. His mother's getting ready to do Thanksgiving dinner. She walks past him and she wakes him up. Then he stayed up the rest of the day. And he goes, he messaged me, he goes, I haven't had a lot of sleep. This is going to be fun. Then the father comes out of the bedroom, and I guess the father had been drinking because he used to stash liquor in his bedroom. I said, yeah. I said, is he lucid? And he goes, no. Then his sister comes, and his sister starts drinking wine but had seen the two of them drunk. So she started really drinking because she spends part of the day with their mother, and then she goes to her in-laws' house. So it got his mother so twisted, she started drinking. Usually she'll have a glass and she's done. Nope, she was drinking, because even that September, it was George Washington Bridge Gate, and I had gone to go to his cousin's house to teach his cousin's daughter how to sew, because she got a sewing machine for her birthday. And I got there, and they were finishing up what they were doing, and I noticed he wasn't right. So I go.
I'm sorry. So this is after he got bailed out of jail, and you're at the house?
No, before.
Okay.
I go to the cousin's wife. Says he drinking. She goes, I have no idea. She goes, they've been doing what they're doing. I stay away from them. I'm like, okay, got it. I take him from there, and I go to his sister's house. And he continues drinking. His cousins come. They're telling his brother-in-law, you need to cut him off. He goes, what do you mean? I said, you need to cut him off. I even said it. I said, you need to cut him off. I said, if his mother goes from outside to go hide inside, means he's like beyond wasted. I said, you need to cut him off. They didn't. I drove his mother comes out to me. She goes, can you drive me home? Sure, got it. Drive her home. He's calling me like beyond crazy. She goes, I want to listen to his voicemails. She listens to the voicemails with me once I park the car with her. She goes, you're not going back there. Do you really think I was? I said, I told him to cut him off. His cousins told him to cut him off and he didn't do it. Did you really think I was going to go back there? I said, after I've been through what I've been through with him, after I've been through what I was going through with my father, I said, there's no way I'm going back there. I didn't go back there. He had to find his own way home from his sister's house. But once we were in court and the judge gave him that restriction on family court judge and the criminal court judge couldn't be around firearms. His brother-in-law is a probation officer. So when they came to get his clothes, because he had a court order mandate when he could come for his clothes, he couldn't just go to the police station and say, oh, I want my clothes. And next door, he asked me twice for his clothes. And I'm like, Quay, just stop. Just stop. He has to go through the proper channels. And I'm talking to you about this again. The day he came to get his clothes, he was with his cousin, his brother-in-law, the probation officer. The two police officers are standing on my porch. I said to them, he's a probation officer and he's around weapons. I had all his crap packed to go in to pull out plastic bags from the back of the car. His brother-in-law goes, you don't need those. She packed everything. I was like, my sister was sitting here and she's watching the whole thing. Oh, and he was livid. My sister was here because he thought I'd be here by myself. My sister, he's shocked that I'm here. You should have known that. It's even when we told the cops, we're like, his friends were next door, and his brother-in-law was a probation officer. He's not allowed to turn guns.
Yeah.
His brother-in-law has to lock up his guns because he had two younger kids. But who knows if he had the combination to the lockbox or got the key to the lockbox because he has to separate the ammunition from the weapon. And I said to them, I would watch him. So they did. They watched him. One was on the porch next to my front door, and one was going back and forth, watching him as he was going back and forth. They were standing in my front yard. And once they were getting ready to leave, my sister and I watched them from the front door because we didn't trust him. We knew he was going to go next door. The cops waited until he was like gone. And as soon as I saw him walking into that property, I said to them, he's not allowed next door. We have a full stay away order. They went and made him leave. And the doofus next door looked at me like, and I'm like, my sister goes, don't entertain it. She goes, I got it. The cops were behind his behind. The doofus next door gave him a gallon of liquor. Yet, when he was with me, he never did crap in my house because he was supposed to fix things for me. He would paint in my living room, but he painted it backwards at first. But he never did anything else because he was too busy next door helping next door. And he would booze in return for money. The 13 months in court, I can't tell, in criminal court and 26 months in family court were so traumatizing. But I had to keep myself contained and grounded. That my therapist at the time gave me a healing stone to hold, like when I was testifying, so they could stay grounded because I was grabbing onto the seat so hard that it was making me crazy because that wasn't even grounding me. Or I would sit and look at the pictures, like I would stare at a picture, or I would count the tiles on the floor in the waiting room to ground myself if I got too anxious, especially if I was in there by myself with him, as he would try and sit and catch my eye.
And that's one thing that the court systems fail all of victims with, is making them sit by or even see their abuser at any given time, because it completely takes away your strength. It depletes your ability to be confident in your testimony.
Right.
And I completely get it. I really do. And I'm sorry that you
And
went through
stand
such a
there
long.
yeah. And for him to sit there and move and try and get my attention while I was testifying.
Yep. Yeah, it's because he knows that it will alter your
And what,
confidence.
yeah, and what I was saying was the truth, and it was pissing him off. Because he would forget I could remember everything, because doing what I do, you have to remember everything. Because even
Right.
still, I remember things I did at my first firm 30 years ago when I started. And I still remember stuff I did at my last firm for the last 18 years. Because if my
Right.
boss would call me now, I'd still be able to tell him where everything was.
And you know what, Stephanie, I want to ask you a couple questions based on what you shared, and then we'll wrap it up here. When you were going to your job, when you were sleeping there for your own safety, did they help you, or were they, how were they supportive? Did they let you go? What was the outcome?
They wanted to fire me because I was in court for so long. The last time I had walked in there and slept in the office is when they called HR and said, Stephanie's been sleeping here for her safety. We need to get her a lawyer. So that's when they called Sanctuary and got me Sanctuary, it's a lawyer. But Sanctuary does more than just legal work. They do therapy, they do economic empowerment, they do immigration work, they do all kinds of things for survivors of domestic violence. And it's amazing because they started me in therapy at Sanctuary. And then once my time at Sanctuary's therapy was done, they sent me to an outside therapist that just deals with trauma. And going through what I've gone through, even now, still going to therapy, you learn more about yourself and you continue to ground yourself and you continue to grow. So my mother has said, you know what, since you finished court to now, or even when you were going through court, you've gotten stronger because you can speak out about it.
That's right.
He used to rape me too. That this year I spoke at Denim Day, at Sexual Assault Day.
Yeah.
And my mother was like, you know what, I'm proud of you for doing that. My sister says, no, don't do it. And then the day I was speaking, my sister don't want to see it.
Yeah.
Is it going to be televised? I'm like, no, but first you tell me don't do it, but now you tell me to do it. Whatever.
Nobody walks in your shoes but you, and you only do what you feel comfortable and confident doing. And
Right.
I cannot believe that rape was a part of all of this. Just to not to shorten anything that you said, but to give our listeners a summary of what you shared. As a child, you were exposed to domestic violence because
Yeah.
your father was, his coping mechanisms was to resort to alcohol, which the alcohol helped prompt him to become abusive. Your mother left, and then you guys were living your own life. And when you were a teenager, you and your sister, you're older than her, so you're working. He's asking to see you guys. He's still tantalizing your
Yeah.
mom. You have a choice to say yes or no. You choose to say no. And with that no, he then starts to stalk you. And then with your sister, even though she was still teenager, she had the option to say no as well. And I'm assuming that was honored because that's
Yes.
what you had shared.
Mhm.
And then during those teenage years, in between, the hardest time, of course, is teenage years. So during that time, here you are catching eyes for this good-looking boy that seems
Yeah.
to be a protector and seems to be
Mhm.
standing up to people who are not being as nice or being bullies. He's standing up to the bullies. And then you get this crush, and then as adult, you run into him again, and you guys have this relationship,
Huh?
and slowly, obviously not upfront, but slowly he became this what you called narcissistic individual, where alcohol came into the picture, finances came into the picture, to the point where your dogs were afraid of him, and they were not protecting you, standing up to the abuser in your own home, all the way up to the point where you're having your head bashed in so bad that you're having seizures. And this is a 5-year time frame that you're with this guy, and for whatever reason, no matter how many times you kicked him out, this on again, off again, on again, off again relationship existed. Do you feel, for our listeners who may be going through the same thing, or who may not have the ability to see it because they're in it, and for those that have been through it already, do you think that helped enable his behaviors, the on again, off again, forgiving and then accepting and then giving chances over and over?
Forgiving the chances and not having the NYPD listen to me the first time made him meaner, because I can stay here, I can manipulate her.
Right, because the law itself wasn't particularly protecting you in that space.
Right. And the laws in the state didn't get stronger, in the country they didn't get stronger until 2018.
Right.
And they're changing even more. Now
Right.
they're getting stronger.
Exactly.
And each state has their own different laws.
Correct. And then something else that I really want to hone in on as well, to everybody who's listening, work for a lot of us is our safe haven.
Yep.
We go there to feel protected, to be able to even share with coworkers. And it's hit or miss when employers actually have DV resources a part of their employee assistant programs. It's very few and far in between that I've seen them actually embedded in their EAPs. It's usually for gamblers or porn addicts or alcoholics, not so much for victims of domestic violence who just need a safe place to live a life and work. And thank goodness that he wasn't that confident with his abuse that he didn't come into the workplace and jeopardize everybody's safety. That's definitely something that corporations, in my opinion, should consider, providing help and assistance to their employees so that it doesn't turn into a mass issue.
But when I got my order of protection, I sent it down to my HR department, and then that showed him that he couldn't come anywhere on the work at my workplace. When I came in one morning, and I was the fire warden, so I used to sign in at the desk. They're like, "We heard that you have an order of protection." I said, "Yeah." They're like, "Send me his picture. They'll give it to security. He's not allowed on the property." I said, "Okay, got it." I went upstairs, took his picture, emailed it to the email address he gave me, and they would watch the cameras because they didn't trust him either.
Of course. And good for doing that. Good for you for doing that.
Yeah. Because in New York State, when you get an order of protection, even when it says that they have to stay away from your job, you have to give it to HR so that they can know. And since I've been in court, offices cannot fire you if you're in domestic violence court or in criminal court, because each borough has their own way of dealing with domestic violence. One is like combined criminal and family court. Some are separated.
So can you clarify for the listeners that might be in the state of New York, which one is that, the family court or the criminal court, that says, that mandates that if you are in a domestic violence situation, you cannot be fired?
New York State itself made it that you cannot be fired if you're in family court.
Family court. Okay, that's what it needs to be. Family court. Okay. All right.
Family court is usually the longer court. Criminal court comes and goes, and it's really done fast. Some of the boroughs in Manhattan, like Manhattan, combines it.
Okay.
Bronx separates it. No, Bronx keeps it together. Queens separates it. Brooklyn separates it. Staten Island separates it.
So it's by county, not by state then. It's by
Correct.
county. Okay.
But if you're like you're in a domestic violence court, like you have to go file charges in certain boroughs, but it's also gonna fall into a divorce and custody case. Put it into IPV court, which is a combined court, which is like what Manhattan and the Bronx does. Manhattan and Bronx doesn't separate it. When you get charges for assault and domestic violence, it goes into one court. And
Thank you. No, yeah, thank you for sharing that, because our listeners in the state of New York needs to know this for sure, and especially also advising that the sanctuary is a good place to get assistance as well. For our listeners, if you can provide some wounds to wisdom, meaning what you've learned so strongly from the wounds that you have endured, what are the things to look for? What are the things to look for that tells you get out? What are the things that you felt within that told you this was it, this was enough? And what would you tell somebody who's in a situation to help them realize or understand that it's time to go?
there's many red flags in any relationship, any domestic violence relationship. Sometimes, like for me, that last time when he sat on me, because I said to myself, he can't keep doing this to me, because that wasn't the first time he had done it.
Yeah, so know your worth. Know your worth.
Know your worth. You have to see the red flags, because narcissists have so many red flags that you have to know your strength than having to deal with the mental abuse and the emotional abuse and everything on the power wheel that's besides the physical, because it's not just physical, and you don't want your mentality to be degraded because it takes your life away and you walk on eggshells. And I said to myself, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. Because when I couldn't even sleep and I was the breadwinner in the house, I'm like, I would ask him, I'm like, so who pays all the bills and you're up all night and you're not letting me sleep and I have to go to work? Because my boss would call me after hours or on the weekends to do work for him. And I'm like pulling off numbers. And he'd look at me and he goes, oh, Ribbony, you remember everything. I'm like, yeah, you think?
Yeah, so it also sounds like he was depleting you, and that would be another flag or
once they take control of your entire life, your financial abuse, mentality abuse, start to control everything in your life.
Yes. Sorry, for our listeners, that's the power and control wheel that Stephanie is referring to. And that's a great resource to self-check where your relationship falls. Looking at that power and control wheel will give you examples of what each area that she's referring to looks like and how you may feel. So it is very informative. Thank you. Thank you for raising that. Can I ask, what are you doing? What are you doing today? It sounds like this is something that is of your past. You are still dealing with a lot of things from it, because it's something that we never forget. You're still dealing with health issues and medical issues from it. Obviously, coping skills are a huge thing.
I have a huge thing on coping skills because
Yeah.
even though it's been so many years, certain days I still have to block out and pretend they don't ever exist.
Like, yeah, because you're triggered. You're triggered by something, and then that's how you go.
The day we went to court, that doesn't bother me anymore. The day I filed my charges and went to court doesn't bother me anymore. But the All-Star game for baseball, don't mention that to me. I don't want to see it because I'll get triggered.
Okay.
Like people talk about it. I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't even want to talk about it. They're like, right. I'm like, don't start with me, please. But then like Thanksgiving, I've gotten over because he used to destroy my Thanksgivings. And one December, right before Christmas, I went to his mother's house. And that was the first and only time I went there. I've gotten my Christmas back slowly, but I have to remember, you know what, that was his problem. And that's why I stopped going.
That's right.
Because I saw the whole dynamic in that house. And that was first and only time I went there. And he goes, why aren't you coming back? And his mother's like, why aren't you coming over? I said, after that Thanksgiving, no, for my peace of mind and my sanity and not to be triggered all the way back to when I was a kid. Sorry, not going.
Good for you. Good for you for standing up for yourself and sticking to your ground. And it also sounds like you are still in therapy, like you said. And
Yes.
I am a firm believer of coaching, therapy, counseling, anything that helps you stay your course on what you've been through. Forgiveness, strength, confidence, clarity, understanding your boundaries. And one thing that I definitely like to reiterate
And
whenever I can.
Classes, and I continue to do educational classes on domestic violence through Sanctuary.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Okay, say that again. What do you do and where do you do it?
I do educational classes on domestic violence. There's some within my state. There's some that's globally. My second and third great grandmother are Indigenous, so they just had an Indigenous domestic violence class. So I did that to learn because I probably I have cousins out there, and it's like what they're doing to the Indigenous people, it needs to be changed too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can you
that pisses me off knowing that, especially that I'm part Indigenous, that makes me mad. But I go online and I look up the domestic violence classes, and Sanctuary had one it was called DB 101, and I took that. And then my attorney asked me to be a survivor leader. And I did the 12 weeks of classes, and now I'm a survivor leader for Sanctuary Family. And I go out and I speak at Denim Day, and I'm being asked to speak at Ovarian Cancer Day, not just on being a cancer survivor, but being a domestic violence survivor because of what he did to me during cancer.
What a definition of post-traumatic growth. Look at everything that you have been through since a child. And today you sit here on this Confronting Domestic Violence show, and you are not only sharing your story, you're also sharing your journey and how you got through it, what you're still challenged with, what you're doing to continuously level up your coping skills, and what you're giving back to the same community. So
Yes.
with that being said, can you please tell our listeners where they can find you for help?
My Instagram is snowkid8570.
No Kit?
Yeah, no, it's Snow S8570 is my Instagram. SNOW 8570 is my Instagram. And my TikTok is O'Neill Snow. And if they need any resources in New York State, which Sanctuary is very involved with passing the laws, they're called sanctuaryforfamilies.org.
Sanctuaryforfamilies.org. Okay, I'm writing that down as well so I can make sure that I put that in our credits and have this on here for people to find you and reach out to you, whether it's for assistance, whether it's for support, whether it's to partake in your mission and vision. And what we are a community. We find each other. We want to give back for the greater cause of the greater good. As domestic violence doesn't discriminate, it happens to anybody, everybody, all genders, all cultures, all religions, everything.
Everybody.
There's no rhyme or reason. It's just so sad that it's still such a huge human rights issue that is
Now it's happening
not
so much.
tackled.
LGBTQ community too, which is
Oh
nice.
yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Does not discriminate at all. Yeah.
No.
Stephanie, I want to thank you so much for being on our show today and for sharing your story and for just being the strong, courageous woman that you are, for empowering and inspiring others. Again, your story may be saving somebody else's life. And even if
Mhm.
we just do it for the one, then we're doing the right thing.
Exactly. As you go through your journey, you get stronger.
That's
And you
right.
see all those signs, and even coming out of it, you get stronger every day. And
That's
you,
right.
the community helps each other, because going through Survivor Leaders, we've become really good friends. We don't know each other's story completely, but we're very good friends with each other.
That's right. And it takes a community to come together to make a difference. And
Yeah.
that's the other thing too, is that so many of us feel siloed, isolated, or
Mhm.
alone, and that's where we suffer. And that's not the case. There's so many, the statistics show that there's so many of us out there. If you are in that situation, any listener that's in the situation and you feel isolated, ashamed, or by yourself, you're not. Please
Yeah.
open your mouth, talk to somebody, and I guarantee you that you will find a community and a support system
And there's
faster
many
than you ever
resources.
thought.
The National Domestic Violence and NEDV.
Yep.
There's so many resources out there. Safe Horizons,
Confronting
Confronting Violence. You
That's
know,
right.
there's always somewhere to get help.
That's right. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend.
Confronting Domestic Violence is a 501c3. All contributions, volunteers, and sponsorships are welcomed. It takes a community to make a difference. Nobody should suffer alone. Please scan the QR code.